Illinois Governor JB Pritzker accuses President Donald Trump of trying to steal the midterm elections by intimidating voters. But in a shocking twist, Trump responds with a bombshell that instantly flips the narrative and leaves Pritzker reeling. This explosive showdown exposes the heated battle for control of America's future, and it's a moment viewers can't afford to miss. The air was thick with tension as Illinois Governor JB Pritzker stormed onto the press stage in Springfield. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, waiting for another headline. His face burned red with anger as he raised his voice for the nation to hear. "Donald Trump is trying to steal the midterm elections," he bellowed. "He's making illegal immigrants afraid to vote with his cruel policies, deporting families, kicking people off Medicaid, and destroying everything America stands for." The crowd erupted with mixed reactions. Some cheered, others gasped. Pritzker doubled down, calling Trump a scumbag, mentally disabled, and unfit to serve. His words dripped with rage, meant to humiliate the president. But what the cameras didn't capture at first were the worried whispers in the back of the room. Even some of Pritzker's allies exchanged uneasy glances. His insults felt desperate, too personal. Pritzker thought he had landed the biggest blow yet. But across town, in a waiting motorcade, President Trump had already heard every word. He sat silently, his eyes narrowed, his hands folded. And in that silence, America's most shocking counterattack was already forming. Within minutes, Trump's team briefed him on Pritzker's tirade. Advisors buzzed, warning him to ignore it, to stay presidential. But Trump's instincts were sharper than ever. "They think I'm corrupt," Trump muttered. "Wait until I show them the truth about Pritzker." Outside, the streets of Springfield pulsed with tension. Protesters clashed, waving banners, some shouting, "Protect democracy," while others screamed, "Stop the fraud." Police held barricades, but the fear of chaos loomed. Inside his SUV, Trump remained calm. He wasn't rattled by the insults. Instead, he leaned back and began drafting notes for a speech that would shatter everything Pritzker had built. His voice was steady, almost measured, as he rehearsed. "That's funny. So illegals can vote? Legally?" he whispered under his breath, rehearsing the line. His aides glanced nervously at each other, realizing what was about to happen. Back at the press hall, Pritzker basked in attention. Reporters swarmed him with microphones. "Governor, do you believe President Trump is dangerous to democracy?" Pritzker grinned. "More than dangerous. He is a disgrace." He thought the day was his victory. But in reality, the storm that was coming would leave him reeling. By evening, the nation was glued to their screens. Every network cut to a live feed of the White House podium. Trump, the 47th president, stepped out with measured confidence. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't angry, he was calm, too calm. "Governor Pritzker says my policies intimidate voters," Trump began, his voice steady. "Well, let's think about that." He paused, letting the silence grip the nation. "Illegals voting? That's exactly what the court cases coming up are about. Both Pritzker and Newsom are letting non-citizens vote in local races, and now Pritzker admits it on live TV. Gasps rippled through the press room. Trump leaned forward, his eyes locked on the cameras. That means one thing: mandatory ICE agents at every polling place for the 2026 and 2028 elections. No mail-in ballots, no harvesting, no funny business, same-day voting, proof of citizenship, watermarked paper ballots. The room fell silent. Even hostile reporters froze. Trump wasn't defending himself. He was turning the attack into a national reckoning. Meanwhile, in Springfield, Pritzker's phone buzzed with alerts. His face drained of color as he realized Trump hadn't just answered him. He had set a trap. Governor Pritzker slammed his phone on the table after rewatching Trump's speech. His staffers circled him nervously, whispering updates from Twitter, Fox, and CNN. The tide was turning, and fast. "What's happening?" Pritzker demanded. "Sir, the people liked it," one aide admitted. "Even some of our voters are saying Trump made sense. They're calling him strong, calm, presidential." Pritzker's fists tightened. This wasn't supposed to happen. He thought his insults would weaken Trump, not boost him. But now the phones at the governor's office were ringing nonstop. Families wanted to know why he opposed National Guard protection in Chicago. Others asked why he denied the city's violence problem. For the first time that night, Pritzker felt cornered. Meanwhile, outside the governor's mansion, protesters gathered with homemade signs. Some shouted his name in anger, accusing him of siding with criminals. Others demanded answers about Medicaid abuse and illegal immigrants voting. The noise outside grew louder, and Pritzker felt the walls closing in. In Washington, Trump prepared for his next move, one that would not just answer Pritzker's lies, but expose his entire empire. The Oval Office lights burned late into the night. Trump sat with his closest advisors, papers spread across the resolute desk. Documents, reports, and old case files, years of evidence that few had ever seen. "This isn't just about an election," Trump said firmly. "This is about showing the people who JB Pritzker really is." He pointed at one folder, his administration's failures in Chicago. "Look at the crime statistics. 13 years of leading the nation in homicides." He said, "That's not an emergency, that's a disgrace." Another aide slid forward a dossier. "And here, Mr. President, connections between Pritzker's family foundation and millions funneled into radical programs." Trump nodded, his jaw tight. "Perfect. The people deserve the truth." Every line of the upcoming speech was crafted not for politicians, but for the families watching at home. For the mother afraid to let her child walk to school. For the veteran who felt ignored by corrupt officials. "This isn't about fighting with Pritzker," Trump reminded his team. "It's about fighting for America." When he finally leaned back, silence filled the room. Everyone knew this next speech would be the moment history remembered. Morning sunlight washed over Washington as cameras clicked into place. The White House press room was packed wall to wall. Journalists expected fireworks, but they weren't ready for what came next. Trump stepped up to the podium, his expression calm, almost fatherly. He didn't rush. He let the cameras focus, then began. "Governor Pritzker says National Guards at voting booths intimidate people," Trump said. "But tell me, who here feels unsafe when our soldiers stand watch? For generations we've celebrated them in parades, leaned on them in disasters, trusted them with our very lives." The crowd shifted, listening closely. "The only people who fear our troops," Trump continued, "are those with something to hide. Criminals, illegals, people who want to rig the system." Gasps spread across the room. Pritzker's words were unraveling thread by thread. Trump leaned in. "And while Governor Pritzker says there's no emergency in Chicago, families there know the truth. For 13 years it's led America in homicides. 13 years. He'll call in the Guard to protect politicians, but not the children of his own state. What kind of leadership is that?" The room erupted with shouts, questions, flashes. Across Illinois, hearts sank. And Pritzker knew his nightmare had only just begun. The night felt longer than usual in Springfield. Governor JB Pritzker sat slouched in his chair, tie loosened, sweat running down his forehead. His communications director placed a stack of newspapers on the desk. Every headline screamed the same thing. Trump turns the tables. Local stations that usually favored Democrats were replaying Trump's calm but firm words about Chicago crime and election security. Polls on social media showed a sudden swing. Ordinary people were siding with the president. Pritzker cursed under his breath. "They're eating it up like candy," he growled. "I need a counterpunch, fast." But his aides looked away. Some had already realized there might not be a comeback. Out on the streets, mothers held their children tighter, nodding at Trump's words about safety. Veterans in diners quietly applauded his defense of the National Guard. Even people who didn't usually vote Republican were starting to ask one another, maybe he's right? For the first time in years, JB Pritzker wasn't controlling the narrative. He was running from it. In a small Chicago neighborhood, Maria Lopez watched the replay of Trump's speech with tears in her eyes. Her teenage son had been killed in gang crossfire 2 years earlier. Pritzker had dismissed calls for stronger security, saying, "The city can handle it." Now, as Trump's words played across the TV, Chicago has led the nation in homicides for 13 years. Maria nodded painfully. Finally, someone said it out loud. She wasn't alone. Across Illinois, families who had lost loved ones to violence felt seen for the first time. Social media flooded with emotional posts, pictures of lost children, fathers, daughters, captioned with Trump's speech. Meanwhile, veterans filmed videos thanking Trump for defending the honor of the military against claims they intimidated voters. Clips of Trump's calm delivery went viral, gaining millions of views overnight. Every post hit Pritzker like a hammer. His phone buzzed endlessly. Angry families, furious voters, even donors worried about the backlash. The voices of the people, long ignored, were suddenly louder than his insults. The next morning, the White House announced another live address. Reporters rushed to get seats. By now, the air buzzed with expectation. Trump walked out steady as ever. Cameras flashed. He wasted no time. "Governor Pritzker says I'm trying to steal elections," Trump began. "But let's ask, who's really been stealing from the people?" He held up a folder. Billions wasted under Illinois' broken leadership. Taxpayer money funneled into failed projects, friends and family enriched, while ordinary citizens suffer. This isn't leadership, it's corruption. The room went silent. Trump leaned in, his tone sharp but controlled. And while Pritzker lectures America about democracy, his own administration is under fire for backroom deals and fraud investigations. The people of Illinois deserve better. Gasps filled the room as cameras zoomed in. Reporters scribbled frantically. For Pritzker, watching from Springfield, it felt like the floor had given way. His worst fear was coming true. Trump wasn't just defending himself. He was peeling back the curtain on everything Pritzker had worked to hide. The battle was no longer about words. It was about survival. Morning news in Chicago painted a grim picture for Governor Pritzker. Radio callers vented their frustrations, mothers cried on air, and small business owners demanded answers. One caller shouted, "Why is our governor protecting criminals instead of us?" Pritzker tried to strike back with another press conference. Cameras rolled as he puffed his chest, accusing Trump again of fear-mongering and bullying immigrants. But this time, something was different. Instead of applause, a woman in the crowd shouted, "What about my son? He was shot walking home from school." Another voice yelled, "Why didn't you call the guard when gangs took over our neighborhood?" The press conference spiraled out of control. Pritzker's staff scrambled to quiet the room, but the damage was done. His words no longer carried weight. The people were speaking louder than him. Back in Washington, Trump watched the footage in silence. He didn't need to smile. The truth was unfolding exactly as he had predicted. America was beginning to see who the real deceiver was. That evening, Trump's team released documents to the press. Not rumors, not speculation, hard evidence. Copies of contracts, spending reports, and state audits showing billions wasted on pet projects in Illinois. The highlight, a failed energy initiative that swallowed nearly $2 billion in taxpayer money, but never delivered results. The papers showed direct ties to Pritzker's closest allies, with inflated salaries and hidden kickbacks. The headlines exploded within hours. Trump exposes Illinois corruption. News anchors read aloud the numbers with stunned voices. People watching from their living rooms shook their heads in disbelief. Families who had been scraping by on tight budgets asked themselves, how could he steal from us while we suffer? Trump didn't gloat. He stepped up to the cameras and spoke softly. This isn't about politics. This is about the families who trusted their leaders and were betrayed. Illinois deserves better. America deserves better. The calmness in his tone pierced deeper than anger ever could. Many who had doubted him before suddenly felt an emotional shift. They saw a man fighting for them, not for himself. Inside the governor's mansion, Pritzker paced back and forth like a trapped animal. His advisors whispered urgently, but he wasn't listening. His phone buzzed with angry calls from donors demanding explanations. Some even threatened to cut ties. Reporters camped outside his gates, shouting questions about the exposed contracts and wasted billions. Protesters carried candles, holding up pictures of loved ones lost to Chicago's endless violence. One mother cried into a microphone, "My daughter is gone, and our governor spent our money on fake projects." Enough is enough. Pritzker's face turned pale as he watched the coverage. The insults he once hurled at Trump now echoed back against him. For years, he called Trump corrupt. But tonight, the word corruption was stuck to his own name. Meanwhile, Trump prepared another statement. He wasn't done yet. He knew there was more to reveal. Something personal. Something that would leave Pritzker with nowhere to run. And across America, millions of viewers braced themselves. The showdown was no longer politics as usual. It was about truth, justice, and the future of the nation. By dawn, Illinois was boiling with whispers. Coffee shops buzzed, barbershops argued, and churches filled with conversations not about Sunday sermons, but about their governor. "Did you see the documents Trump released?" an elderly man asked in a diner. $2 billion gone, and not one family helped. A young mother leaned across the booth. "We lost our apartment last year while they wasted money. It makes me sick." The people's anger wasn't just political. It was personal. For years they had trusted Pritzker to protect their communities, but now the betrayal cut deep. Meanwhile, reporters in Washington picked up another rumor. Trump's team had uncovered financial ties that connected the governor's office to controversial family donations. Journalists smelled blood in the water. Inside his mansion, Pritzker raged at his staff. "They're turning my family into a weapon. They can't do this." But he knew he was losing control. The world was seeing his empire for what it was, not leadership, but a dynasty feeding itself while Illinois crumbled. That evening, Trump addressed the nation again. The press leaned forward, expecting fireworks. But what came was more devastating. Calm facts. He began with a single sentence that sent shivers through the room. "Governor Pritzker talks about fairness, yet his own cousin funds programs that confuse our kids and strip away family values." Gasps echoed. Trump continued, showing records of million-dollar donations to organizations pushing radical agendas. The connection was undeniable. "This isn't leadership," Trump said softly. "This is betrayal of our children, of our families, of America itself." The words landed like thunder. Across living rooms in Illinois, parents clutched their children closer. Some wept openly, realizing that while they struggled to pay bills, their leaders had been financing ideologies that broke apart the very fabric of family life. Pritzker's name was now tied not only to corruption, but to something far deeper, an attack on values dear to everyday Americans. The backlash was immediate. Protesters swarmed the Illinois state capitol, chanting for answers. Signs read, "Our kids deserve better," and "End the corruption." National networks broadcast live images of mothers in tears, fathers shouting that they'd been lied to. The crowd wasn't small, it was massive, stretching across blocks. Inside his office, Pritzker collapsed into a chair, his face pale. His aides tried to prepare talking points, but every word felt hollow. The tide had turned against him, and he knew it. In contrast, Trump remained steady. His words spread like wildfire on social media, millions sharing clips with captions like, "Finally, someone speaks for us." The emotional weight was heavy. For the first time, even Democrats in Illinois began whispering that Pritzker might not survive this politically. And yet the president wasn't finished. Trump still had more truths to reveal. Truths that would not only bury Pritzker, but also restore faith in a country desperate for justice. By mid-afternoon, the whole country seemed frozen. Offices, classrooms, and cafes had televisions tuned in, waiting for Trump's next move. Social media feeds were flooded with one question: what else does he have on Pritzker? In Chicago, a father named David sat at his kitchen table, staring at a framed picture of his son who had been killed in a drive-by. He whispered, "Finally, someone's speaking for us." Tears rolled down his cheeks as he posted Trump's speech online with the caption, "This is the truth they didn't want us to hear." Meanwhile, in the White House, Trump's staff prepared new files. The president himself sat quietly reviewing them, circling numbers with a red pen. He wasn't rushing. He knew the weight of patience. Every pause made America lean in harder. And in Springfield, Pritzker was losing sleep. His staff reported more defections, donors pulling out, allies distancing themselves, even mayors calling for him to resign. The walls of his political empire were collapsing. The nation wasn't just watching a battle, it was watching a reckoning unfold in real time. Trump returned to the podium in the East Room that evening. The atmosphere was electric. Even veteran reporters held their breath. "Governor Pritzker," Trump began, "claims to fight for the people. But here are the facts." He lifted a page high. While Illinois families begged for help, his administration approved millions in taxpayer funds for luxury contracts, renovations, office perks, private jets, not for the people, for himself. Gasps filled the room. Reporters rushed to snap photos of the documents displayed on screens behind him. And when violence spread across Chicago, what did he say? "No emergency," Trump continued. But the same man called in the guard to protect his own party at the DNC. He'll protect politicians, but not children. The line hit like a hammer. Across America, parents wept, clutching their kids. Veterans saluted at their TVs. Even some critics admitted privately, Trump had struck a chord too powerful to ignore. And Pritzker, watching from his mansion, smashed a glass against the wall. His greatest fear was now true. The people were turning against him, and there was nothing he could say to stop it. By nightfall, the emotional wave was unstoppable. Families poured into the streets holding candles. Vigil after vigil was held across Illinois. Pictures of loved ones lost to crime surrounded by flickering light. People prayed together, whispering Trump's words about justice and truth. An elderly woman stood before the cameras in tears. "I buried my grandson because no one cared. Tonight, I feel like someone finally does." Her words went viral within minutes. Even in states far from Illinois, Americans felt the weight. Calls poured into radio stations from Texas to Ohio. This isn't about politics. This is about saving our country. Meanwhile, Trump prepared to deliver the final stages of his case. His advisors urged caution, but he shook his head. The truth belongs to the people. No more hiding. Back in Springfield, Pritzker sat alone, staring at his reflection in a dark window. His bravado was gone. He whispered to himself, almost trembling, "They'll never forgive me." For the first time, he realized this wasn't just a political fight. It was the end of his reign, and the beginning of something bigger than he ever imagined. Newsrooms across Illinois erupted as a set of leaked emails hit journalists' inboxes. The messages, authenticated by investigators, revealed Pritzker's inner circle mocking ordinary citizens, calling them gullible and easy to distract. One email even admitted, "As long as they're arguing about Trump, no one asks about the billions we redirected." The story exploded. Radio hosts read the emails live on air, their voices shaking with disgust. Ordinary Americans listening on their morning commutes clenched their fists at the betrayal. Trump addressed the leak without theatrics. These words show what Governor Pritzker really thinks of his own people. He doesn't serve them, he uses them. The silence in the press room afterward was heavy. It wasn't just about corruption anymore. It was about contempt. Pritzker slammed his desk, shouting at his aides, "Who leaked this?" But deep down, he knew the problem wasn't the leak, it was the truth. Across Chicago, Springfield, and small towns alike, vigils turned into marches. Mothers held up pictures of sons killed by gang violence. Fathers carried signs reading, "Where was our guard?" Children held candles taller than their arms. One grandmother trembled as she told a reporter, "I begged this governor for help. He laughed at us." But Trump listened. Her words pierced millions watching live broadcasts. Even people far from Illinois wiped tears as they realized the depth of pain families had carried in silence for years. For once, it wasn't about red or blue. It was about right and wrong. Meanwhile, in the White House, Trump watched the coverage quietly. He leaned to an aide and said, "This is why we fight, not for power, for them." In contrast, Pritzker watched the same coverage from his mansion, his face ashen. The chants outside his gates grew louder. "Step down, step down." The governor who once mocked Trump as unfit now couldn't even convince his own people he was fit to lead. The next bombshell came not from leaks, but from Trump himself. Standing tall before the cameras, he dropped his voice low, almost solemn. "Governor Pritzker," Trump said, "wants to accuse others of corruption. But let's talk about what he hides within his own family." The room froze. Trump continued, revealing Jennifer Pritzker's massive donations to organizations pushing controversial agendas, including the $500,000 grant for a gender identity clinic at a children's hospital. He laid out how JB Pritzker himself had defended and supported these efforts, while Illinois families struggled with failing schools and rampant crime. "This is the truth," Trump said firmly. While families begged for safety, he funneled support to programs tearing our youth apart. That's not leadership, it's betrayal. The words hit like lightning. Across Illinois, parents broke down crying on live TV. Fathers held their kids tighter. Mothers shook their heads, whispering, "How could he?" For Pritzker, it was the final wound. His name was no longer just tied to waste or corruption. It was tied to something people saw as an attack on their children. And at that moment, the battle was no longer political. It was personal for every family in America. By morning, downtown Chicago was a sea of people. Families held American flags high. Veterans in uniform marched beside mothers holding children's hands. Their chants echoed through the skyscrapers. "Protect our votes. Protect our families." Television crews captured powerful moments, an elderly war veteran saluting while holding a sign that read, "I fought for this country, not for corruption." Tears streamed down his face as passersby applauded. In Springfield, Pritzker watched from his office windows, the noise of protests drifting through the streets. His advisors begged him to make a statement, but he waved them off. "Anything I say now just makes it worse," he admitted bitterly. Meanwhile, the White House carefully monitored the scene. Trump, watching live feeds, shook his head. "The people are already speaking louder than I ever could, but they deserve to hear the whole truth." For everyday Americans, the protests weren't just about Pritzker. They were about years of feeling ignored, dismissed, and lied to. The tide had turned. That evening, Trump stepped before the cameras with a calm but determined expression. His words cut through the noise of politics and spoke directly to families at home. "Governor Pritzker wants you to believe I intimidate voters," Trump began. "But intimidation doesn't come from soldiers at the polls. It comes from politicians who lie, cheat, and waste your hard-earned money while your children suffer." He raised another file. "Tonight I'm exposing more. State contracts padded with millions for insiders, secret payments to lobbyists, and personal perks taken straight out of taxpayers' pockets. This isn't democracy. It's theft." The evidence splashed across TV screens. Numbers, names, signatures. Reporters gasped. Even anchors who once criticized Trump struggled to find words. Then Trump leaned in, his voice steady. "This is why we fight. Not for me, not for Republicans or Democrats. For every family who deserves honesty, safety, and respect." At that moment, living rooms across America erupted with applause. Parents hugged their children. Elderly couples wept in relief. Trump wasn't just defending himself. He was defending them. Inside the governor's mansion, chaos reigned. Advisors screamed into phones, donors fled, and lawyers debated whether Pritzker should resign before the fire consumed him completely. Pritzker sat alone in his study, his hands trembling. Every insult he had hurled at Trump now haunted him. He once mocked Trump as unfit, but it was he who now looked powerless, broken, and exposed. Outside, protesters surrounded his gates with candles, singing patriotic hymns that echoed into the night. Some cried as they clutched photos of lost loved ones, their grief finally finding a voice. Meanwhile, Trump's approval soared. Clips of his speeches dominated every network. Hashtags like Stand with Trump and Your Truth for Families trended worldwide. The battle was no longer about one governor's accusations. It had become a defining moment for America, a clash between deception and truth, between corruption and accountability. And as the night grew darker, everyone knew Trump wasn't finished. The final blows were still to come. The Illinois state capitol overflowed with anger. Lawmakers demanded answers, so an emergency hearing was called within hours. Cameras were everywhere, capturing the raw tension. Families who had lost children to violence sat silently in the gallery, their faces lined with grief. A state auditor took the stand first, reading aloud shocking numbers of wasted taxpayer funds, projects that were half-built, vendors that were never real, and contracts that vanished into thin air. Each sentence was a dagger. Trump appeared on a live video feed from Washington. Calm, steady, he spoke directly to the families. "This isn't about politics. It's about your lives, your children, your safety." The crowd in the chamber erupted with applause and tears. Some hugged strangers. Others wept openly, finally feeling heard. Pritzker, forced to sit stone-faced before the cameras, could barely look up. The people's grief was no longer hidden. It was staring him in the face. The hearing shifted when a surprise witness took the floor. A former state contractor with shaking hands and a trembling voice. He revealed invoices signed off by Pritzker's administration, documents tied to shell companies that never delivered services. "They told me to keep quiet," the man whispered, fighting tears. "But I couldn't live with it anymore." While families begged for help, they lined their own pockets. Gasps filled the room. Journalists scrambled to photograph the documents projected onto the big screen. Some legislators buried their faces in their hands. Trump, still on the feed, leaned closer. "This is the real intimidation. Leaders who betray the very people they swore to serve." The whistleblower broke down, covering his face as the audience stood and applauded him for courage. For ordinary Illinois families, this wasn't politics anymore. It was truth breaking through lies. And for Pritzker, it was the nail in the coffin. By evening, Illinois was at a standstill. Tens of thousands filled the streets chanting in unity, "Enough is enough." Police blocked traffic, but even they quietly admitted they understood the people's rage. On live TV, mothers held photos of children lost to crime. Fathers demanded justice for wasted billions. A teenage girl cried into the camera, "We just wanted a safe place to live. They never cared." Meanwhile, Trump prepared his final address of the night. "America cannot afford leaders who betray her people," he declared. "The truth is out, and now it belongs to you." The words rang like church bells across the nation. In homes from New York to Texas, people watched with wet eyes and clenched fists. Inside his mansion, Pritzker finally broke. He slammed the curtains shut, collapsed into a chair, and whispered to himself, "It's over." The battle for America's future was reaching its climax, and the world knew. The end of this war of words was just around the corner. The nation sat glued to their screens as President Trump stepped forward one last time. The weight of the moment could be felt in every living room, every diner, every town square where crowds gathered around big screens. Trump's voice was calm, but unshakable. "Governor Pritzker says I intimidate voters. But the only intimidation comes from politicians who hide the truth. And tonight, America will know the full truth." He laid out a final series of records, donations, contracts, and backroom deals that tied Pritzker's administration not just to waste, but to a deliberate effort to enrich his allies while Illinois families suffered. While children in Chicago feared for their lives, while businesses closed, while families begged for protection, this governor's hands were busy counting money. The crowd of reporters gasped, their pens frozen. Across the nation, people broke down crying. The betrayal was too real, too raw. And then Trump closed with a line that cut straight to the soul. "America deserves leaders who serve her, not steal from her." The silence that followed was deafening. Illinois erupted overnight. Outside the state capitol, the crowd had swelled into the tens of thousands. Families held American flags high. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder, and mothers wept as they prayed for change. Chants thundered, "We stand with Trump. We stand for truth." Meanwhile, Pritzker was nowhere to be found. His mansion gates remained closed, his lights off. The once defiant governor was now a ghost in his own state. In contrast, Trump's approval soared. Videos of his speeches spread across the globe, with captions like "A president for the people" and "Justice at last." Even those who once doubted him found themselves moved, unable to ignore the clarity of his words. One Chicago father, holding a photo of his son lost to violence, spoke to reporters through tears. "Trump didn't just expose corruption, he gave our pain a voice, and for that, I'll never forget him." It was no longer about party lines, it was about America's heart beating again. The sun rose over Washington as Trump stood on the White House balcony, looking out over a nation forever changed. His fight with Pritzker was no longer just a clash of words. It had become a turning point in history. In Illinois, churches rang their bells. Families gathered in unity. For the first time in years, hope outshined despair. Trump addressed the nation one last time in this saga. His voice carried warmth, conviction, and love for the people. "This is not about me. It's about every American family who deserves safety, honesty, and freedom. Together we will restore our country. Together, we will make America great again." Tears streamed down faces across the nation. People clapped through their sobs, hugging their loved ones tighter. It was a moment of healing, of truth, of faith restored. And as the credits of history turned the page, Donald Trump stood not as a man attacked, but as a leader defended by the very people he served. My friends, if this story touched your heart, don't just watch. Be part of this movement. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss these powerful moments of truth. And for those who want to go deeper with us, join our membership to unlock exclusive features and stand proudly with our growing community. Let's keep this fire alive, together.